Great. We're going to be discussing a very interesting aspect of marketing, which is experience, consumer experience. We all as consumers and practitioners of marketing have a very good view of consumer experience in our respective domains and what we expect as relevant consumer experiences. But really what is interesting is we've got a very fascinating panel, a very diverse panel actually. We've got people from diverse industries. We've got Suresh from the auto industry. We've got Vinit here from the BFSI industry. We've got Kunal from FMCG. And at that, a category which is kind of, transcending the commodity to brand spectrum. And we've got Gaurav, Dhawan from Times Network, a very interesting business model as such that they have. And we'd want to kind of, use this session to unpack consumer experience and what marketers are looking at consumer experience as, as an important element or an important arrow in their quiver, so to say, which is helping them drive loyalty for the brand today and over a longer term. Let me start with you, Kunal. I'm no particular order. Let me just start with you. What is consumer experience to you?
Hello. Am I audible? Yeah. So I think, if you look at, any kind of product, service, consumers have a perception of a brand when they're buying it, right? And this is fundamentally built on the whole experience piece of it. So I define it this way, that experience is something that is built through multiple interactions or multiple touch points that the consumers interact with the brand. And I think that is the foundation on which consumer experience rests.
Interesting. So it's about the multiple interactions that the brand is having.
Yes.
But then there is another aspect to it, which is that if we are looking at a business such as Maruti, which is kind of, where you're looking to kind of replace a vehicle in 7-8 years, whatever the duration be. How does that pan out? In the case of an FMCG, the number of transactions are more frequent and therefore, in a sense, there are very significant nuances to the consistency of delivery. How does it pan out for Maruti and what is your philosophy for consumer experiences, Suresh?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So for the automobile industry, a very high involvement, purchase and a high ticket purchase. And also the cycle, the whole customer journey is a pretty long and complicated one. I mean, it takes a few weeks to a few months, in the whole process of identifying, discovery, and then going ahead with the purchase. So when you're talking about customer experience, it is that much more complicated because there are multiple touch points, like you mentioned. And nowadays, it's not just about physical and, there are also digital and physical experiences at various stages, including, like you said, if it's a replacement or if it's a first-time buy, and multiple human interactions as well. So I think where we see is that customer experience is something which actually defines your brand, it differentiates your brand, it actually kind of signifies and gives a personality to the whole thing. And it's extremely important in building customer loyalty and so on. And for us, because of this multiple complicated and a long drawn process, for us the key word is consistency. Consistency across various interactions, whether it is physical or digital, and how it integrates right through the entire customer journey.
So consistency across touch points is something that seems to be kind of, the refrain, regardless, interestingly, whether it is a very frequently purchased product such as basmati rice or a product that is a very high involvement, fairly high investment decision as such. That essential mantra is something that is kind of, holding true.
If I may just add, Puneet, I mean, we've heard of consumers who've bought rice, and I understand that there's a spectrum of involvement from a car to a rice that the household is buying. People having one poor experience with a brand in terms of a food product, really rejecting it for life is also things, while it is low involvement, But a poor experience is something that puts off the consumer for a period of time.
Absolutely, and it's very difficult to win back the consumer, and
Very
therefore
difficult
the impact that consumer experience has on loyalty is natural and implicit as such. How does it play out for you in the Times Network, Gaurav?
Yeah, thanks, Puneet. So, for us, consumer experience actually starts before the experience actually goes out. It goes by clearly defining what our product or service is all about. If we get that definition sharp and clear, then delivering experiences for us is simpler. I'll give you an example. We have 3 news channels. There is Times Now, there is Mirror Now, there is ET Now. Largely, they are dealing in news, but the way we have defined the brands very sharply. For example, your expectation when you go for a Rohit Shetty film is very different than when you go for a Raju Hirani film. The same consumer, when he watches these 2 films, will get different output from it. So similarly, when you come and watch a Times Now, we want it to be all about action. So it will pick and choose subjects and really go deep on that and really drive for action, drive for accountability, drive for change. Whereas when you look at a Mirror Now kind of a service, it's more Raju Hirani type. It will tell you good things to do, what takes human race forward, how can we fix some gaps in the world, all of that. You'll get into good zones. Whereas when you come to an ET Now, which is in the news space, business news, it will talk about the economic value of everything. So I'll give you an example. If there was, for example, a train accident, Times Now will go deep on that and say, why did the accident happen? Who was the culprit? Was it the driver? Was it some other issue? Mirror Now will go and say how many people lost lives, what was the compensation done for them. So very human side of the same subject. And ET Now will go and say, okay boss, the railways had a budget of say 2% on automation, they didn't use enough. So the same thing will be translated into economic value. So once we define this sharply, then our consumer experience is far more easy for us to deliver. So we know what we need to give to this consumer when he comes on a Times Now, when he comes on a Mirror, when he comes on an ET.
But delivered consistently. So
Yes.
the essential narrative in Times Now will always be about accountability. In Mirror Now, it's going to be about the human stories. And that is something that remains and has to be delivered consistently. And that's really the challenge that...
Interesting is, at the back end, it's the same company. So there are many times there are conflicts between the editors. Why are you taking this point? Why are you taking other? We're saying you have to be true to your brand. So that's how we manage it.
Very interesting management of contradictions, and we'll come back to that in a little while. But Vinit, how do you look at ensuring this? And personally, how do you look at consumer experience? What is your philosophy for managing consumer experience? And then, if we can unpack it a little bit from your standpoint, given your category, which is, which is a relationship over a lifetime. Once somebody purchases, it's a relationship over a lifetime, but it has its own nuances as such, because it's pretty much moribund for some time, and then when you need it, it becomes the most important thing in life.
Yeah, thanks, Puneet. Put it in context, yes, life insurance is a very complex category, and I think the first and starting point for anything in the category is awareness. Consumer experience for us is not primarily that first transaction when somebody buys into, that's probably a transactional where you sort of made a consumer aware of what he's buying into and all that. But I think it's the life cycle of the consumer where we sort of go through, for example, if I were to really look at a human life cycle, first jobbers, getting married, doing some investment, having kids, funding an education loan, planning for retirement, XYZ stuff and all that stuff. At every part of the human life cycle, how do we sort of engage with the consumer? It's more important, that part for us. We'll continue to have transactional relationships all along the journey of a consumer, but are we able to sort of help that guy build a corpus or a life saving or a protection plan over that life cycle that actually serves his purpose? I think that sets the context for a category like us.
Understood. But if I could just, try and probe you further on this, there are 2 parts to it clearly. One is customer acquisition, which is where you're building certain expectations and, an understanding of what the benefit is. And therefore, that experience is in itself a very important component. And then there is the management of the entire life cycle of the requirements from life insurance as such right to the stage when it needs to be kind of, encashed. How do you manage the contradictions of each one of these as such consistently as an organization, if I could kind of,
See, I think the first part is clearly when you're looking at an acquisition model. In an acquisition model, what happens is it's extremely difficult to define a human life value. Once you've really understood a human life value basis certain, sort of parameters that we sort of look into, then it is not very difficult. But that first part of it, really defining what does it sort of a human life value look at, and there are multiple parameters to sort of look at it. To be very honest, an onboarding experience for a category like life insurance is complex, and it remains to be complex. Defining anybody's human life value sitting here is not very easy, like defining cost of a commodity, right? It has to be very, very different. One table, 5 people, 5 different human life values, 5 different need states and all that stuff. So yes, that is complex, but we try to simplify by, not really going too deep into asking people too many things. I think there's a lot of stuff in terms of where that's come into place, which is going to really help ease that journey part of it. Once we've done that, I think the later part of it is how do you manage the engagement part. That engagement part is very simple. We want to give the customer the best experience, not transactionally, but experience. When I say not transactionally, not when he's coming to pay us back, but at every point of time where he needs us. At that point of time, the moment of truth is when the consumer needs us. And to just give you a fact, there have been times when consumers need us and we have possibly looked at a 30 minutes over-the-counter service to customer where we've fulfilled his needs. So when you give a 30 minutes OTC sail through, obviously your documents, everything have to be placed. It's a wow experience. That for us possibly sets the benchmark for what experience should be.
Fantastic. So it is also about superlative, surprising the customer with something that is superlative, a wow experience, as you said, and it is about being able to do it in a manner which is simple enough for the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, you will never expect a consumer walking in and getting all his papers, documents sorted in a 30-minute cycle. I mean, the endeavor is that we do that. I mean, buying a product also, when it comes to high ticket, is a little longer than 30-minute cycle, if I may say, Yeah.
Brilliant. But then, the philosophies for consumer experience and, what really sits within it, are very well understood now, and it is about consistency, it is about managing touch points consistently, ensuring that there is simplicity in the processes and having that element of wow. Now, how do you, and the next question, natural question is, how do we in each one of our businesses, each of your businesses, ensure that meaningful differentiation is created, that wow? How do you kind of, discover that, that aha, that element of wow that is going to be kind of, bringing you a customer who's going to be a customer and ambassador for life? Suresh, if you could possibly start with your views on that.
Yeah, so as Vinit just mentioned, I think creating that wow is important, but it's also important in an area where it is relevant to the customer, which the customer actually kind of. So coming to an automobile experience, I can give you an example. So we have the widest range of products. We have across various categories and segments. And then you have those variants and trim levels, and then the colors and so on. So it's a huge number. We're talking about 800 different kinds of variant, color, combinations. Very difficult for the customer to see each vehicle, or for the dealers to actually have to show that. And sometimes when you actually launch a product, it takes some time before the vehicles reach, and then there's a gap in between. So we had last year a situation like that when we were unveiling the Grand Vitara, and the actual, the start of sales was couple of months away. But the customers were very, very, very keen and very interested in actually having a look at kind of experiencing the car. But physically we didn't have any. So we had to depend on technology, and we gave this VR experience. We were the first ones with the metaverse. We launched the Nexaverse, and it's today the largest implementation of virtual reality in the entire country. Almost 1,500 sets of Oculus sets are there at all our dealerships, and the customer could actually see the vehicle and kind of outside, exteriors, interiors, and other things during the period while before the vehicle was launched. Even today, all showrooms do not have all cars on display and things like that. But then, using technology, any variant, any color, any model, and we can provide the experience. I think that's a first in the industry, and that's also another wow moment, which I'm sure the customers do. And even when we go, further deeper into the countryside and rural markets, I think this is one thing which will help us to actually get the customers to experience the products.
Fantastic. How does it work in your case, Kunal? If you would want to kind of talk to us about creating the differentiation, particularly in your category, where you're looking to move from. You've got a twin challenge. One is the fact that you've got an existing constituency of branded Basmati users, and there is a large constituency of people who are commodity users whom you're looking to kind of migrate into branded Basmati. How do you create those wow moments as such for them?
Sure. So I think very interesting when Suresh spoke about the entire range that say a Maruti has, and obviously it being a much more higher involvement category. I think there are two dimensions I would like to mention here. One dimension which we are trying to do is while we have a very wide range, currently the entire range or how people buy rice today is anchored on price point and grain length and nothing beyond that, right? So as India Gate, we are trying to bring more and more dimensions built on consumer insights, trying to flesh those out and lead to giving that wow moment to the consumer when they are exploring the India Gate range in terms of, oh wow, I can do this with this also, right? So that's one thing, and I believe that education and empowering the consumer, and that is the wow moment in a category like staples, right? The other dimension I feel is again anchored on education and empowerment is, oh wow, can I cook lemon rice with basmati for a South Indian consumer? And I mean, in India we have to go very, very specific to markets, because a South, a Tamil Nadu behaves very differently to a Punjab, and I can't have the similar thing that, And the third dimension that, we are trying to explore now is India Gate has always been basmati. Oh wow, India Gate also has a Sona Masuri with XYZ. So I think these are the things through which we are trying to give the consumer a better experience vis-a-vis buying loose rice at the same point of time, and hence growing, the business through that. So I think these are some of the dimensions that we're trying to do in terms of consumer experience.
So I will just stay on, and Maruti and India Gate in a sense have kind of, a generational role as such. So how have you ensured, and then either one of you could talk about it from your standpoint, how have you ensured that the brands have successfully transcended these generational gaps as such effectively? Even Times of India, for the Times Group, is kind of one of the heritage Indian marquees as such. So how do you ensure that brands remain kind of very much embedded in the core definition of what I am all about? So if I am buying basmati rice in sitting in Chennai, and say biryani is being cooked or whatever, and therefore then says, look, I don't know much about basmati, I'll go and buy India Gate basmati. How has India Gate been able to kind of transcend these generational gaps?
So I think talking about India Gate as a brand, I think you're fairly right in saying that it's been the traditional and a generation that has been vouching for the brand, and it being a very, very kitchen-centric staples brand, again anchored onto a legacy. Having said that, I believe that the newer generation is not averse to legacy, but it is about how we connect to a newer generation. And these are finer nuances, I believe, that, for example, and they stem from very, very strong consumer insights, that when you create something for South, which is pushing the consumer to experiment, then you show a newly wed couple in a very progressive manner, without moving out of the traditional archetype to a large extent. So every brand has the extent to which it can go, right? I believe that India Gate cannot extend itself to a space which it is not comfortable in, but at the same point of time appeal to a wider set of audience and a newer generation in a similar manner. So some of these finer nuances in the way you talk to the consumer, also how you are seen in terms of like, I think, though I don't want to hijack that, but when Suresh spoke about the whole VR experience, I believe that it is seen by a newer generation in a very different light. Yeah. So I think these are some of the things that help, you know, do this.
Suresh, would you want to add?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Kunal. And, as you said, transcending generations, over a period of time, you create legacy, you create this one. So, for example, Maruti Suzuki is known for being reliable. Reliability and trust are the basic first two aspects which come to define Maruti Suzuki as a brand, and that has come over a period of time, over many years of as well. Some people would say it's because of the number of dealerships that we have, spare parts availability, service ho jata hai, things like that. But actually what is core to all that is customer centricity. And in fact, one of our vision statement carries this. Our core values, one of the important core values is customer obsession. So it's about understanding the consumer, getting those insights, and as Kunal mentioned, actually kind of finding out the pain points and trying to give a solution for that. And there are several such examples. And over a period of time with consumer preferences and those insights, there have been several new products and technologies which have been brought in, which actually address those customer preferences, and hence they create a new segment, a new sub-segment, a new, industry defining kind of products and segments that we create, technologies that we create. Being the first, being there right up front when it comes to, like I'll give you a very small example. If you go back a few years, manual transmission vehicles were being sold in passenger vehicles. Automatics were very small numbers. And it was not growing also. The reason being, there were three major reasons why automatic, while it provides you the convenience of two pedals technology, but it was not getting sold. Reasons three. One, it was expensive. 100,000 rupees more for an automatic over a manual. Two, the fuel efficiency dropped at least by 10% for an automatic over a manual. And third, people perceived the automatic to be a little more difficult in terms of maintenance and so on. So, so Maruti Suzuki, we had to find a solution for that. And what we did was we pioneered and brought in a technology called auto gear shift, which was basically a manual transmission in the inside, but then an actuator sitting on top which automatically changed the gears. So for a consumer in terms of experience, it was as good as an automatic, but it solved all the three problems. The pricing was substantially lower, 40,000-50,000 for an automatic. The maintenance was as good as a manual because it was manual. And the fuel efficiency was the same as a manual or slightly better because it was the computer vision. So, you build that kind of a legacy and a relationship and a kind of a brand value that consumers actually across the generations, you have to be relevant to every generation and at every point of time. That's what we believe in.
In fact, just one point to add, I think Suresh very aptly captured it. I think the core is critical, and just for the sake of being relevant to a newer generation, you need not move away from the core. You can be relevant, but sticking true to the core, that values that you stand
and doing
for.
it authentically,
And
doing authenticity rather than authentically. So that's a very interesting segue to, say, for example, your business, Aviva. How do you kind of, differentiate vis-a-vis, competitors in such a category which is, where there are several transactions, several touch points, and at the same time, it is prioritized only at the time when the need is dire, absolutely dire.
Yeah. So let me just keep the engagement part of separately. But I think the category what consumer finally gets is a piece of paper. So there is nothing like styling or the parameters that my friends here have defined, right? So I'll answer this in two parts. One part, as a company, we don't talk about selling life insurance. We talk about from protection to prevention. Now, what is prevention? We are actually looking at saying that can we sort of start building healthy habits for people? Uh, First part obviously is the physical well-being, the second part being the mental well-being, and the third part is the financial well-being. Now, financial well-being actually plays the role of where we understand the consumer very well in terms of what his need state and requirement is, which I've just sort of talked about. But it's extremely important that once you are able to set expectations on the financial and the mental well-being, that you move to the financial well-being, right? And at that stage of point, the products that are offered to a consumer are what he needs. And I'll give you a small example. I have people who are in their mid-20s, 30s and 40s in my team also. The first point of starting point is that a 20-year-old, will he buy that product or not? If my team is not convinced that they're going to buy a product, then there's no point in selling it to consumers. My team has to first buy saying that this is made for me. And that is the time we say, okay, fine, this is past the litmus test, we can go ahead and launch and see if the consumers really feel the need for it or not. And I can just talk about a very simplistic thing which came to us about a couple of weeks back when somebody in my friend circle was talking to me. Somebody's wife was actually talking to me, says, why is it that, my husband has a cover of so-and-so and I don't have a cover of so-and-so? And I actually didn't have an answer for that. And I actually went back and checked saying that, if we have 1 million consumers today, majority of which part 90-95% are male consumers, there is 1 million lost opportunity of women who could have been a potential customer for me also. And that 1 million opportunity was huge. Then we said, let's go ahead and say, give a product where a husband buys, and even if he has a non-working wife, thanks to him, she will also be able to buy a separate and become a separate customer for us. So those are the starting points, turning points for us, where we actually look at internally, one, and obviously we start talking about more, instead of protection, a prevention sort of a outlook.
Interesting. In your case, how do you use, Gaurav, and you've got multiple things that are happening at the same time. You're getting information through various sources about how things are being received by viewers, and there are different viewers that you're catering to. So how do you use data effectively to create that consistency of experience and at the same time that experience which is better than everyone else so that you have the maximum eyeballs?
So in fact, what I'm going to tell you is going to address this question plus the earlier two. You said, how do you create wow and how do you bring legacy in the play and keep winning always? So, and what you have asked now. Yeah. So we have a very simple Coke formula. Okay, it's only known to the people who drive it, and it's working well. So almost on a daily basis, we throw out 8 or 10 subjects on social media, around 11, 12 in the morning, and we keep tracking it all through the day. By evening 5 o'clock, we know which 4 subjects are outperforming the other 6 subjects. Those 4 subjects we pick up and start doing debates in the evening prime time. You know what happens? That's the data that's come to us from you. You have been during your canteen or you're driving or you're sitting back in your car, you like something, you dislike something, you have given some opinion somewhere. And when you go back home, you say, हाँ यार आज किसी ने बोला था, something that Rahul Gandhi said about Modi on cricket match. What is it all about? You were part of it. You helped us select that story, and we did a 20-minute debate on it in the evening on prime time. So when you go back, that's that wow for you. Boss, I had an incomplete information during the day. Now let me get some perspective on it. So that gives us that wow factor. That gives us that consistency, credibility, boss. If there was 2 days ago, there was a big story that India has become the 2nd or 3rd largest economy of the world. We did a story on that saying, boss, that's not true. So once you heard it from the Times, you know it is correct, that it is not true. So that lends, because of the credibility of the brand, when we come with that authority and say that this is not true because this has been misquoted, some new media company, had a casual comment on it and that got spiraled into something else, and one of our ministers then, reposted it, and that's where it became serious. So it happened as an accident, maybe ignore it. We are not yet there, but we will be there soon. So that was the value of the credibility that we brought in. Apart from that, other than the leading politicians of India, we are one of the most popular companies that gives a lot of rewards to viewers. We have a daily contest that happens at least 3 to 4 months in a year. You watch the channel, you answer a question, and you win a prize. So that also helps us maintain consistency and wow for our brands, and helps us target our consumers. They need to come back to us every day. So we also want consumers to stay with us for long periods of time, not just 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just like a Maruti or just like India Gate or even, I mean, Aviva, they want it for lifelong. Right? Till your last day, you should be paying the premium, right? So we also want consumers to be with us and have that relationship over a longer period of time. So we have to invest in this, keep them ahead of the curve, give them points that they can go and talk the next day in their office. Many times they're not aware of what's happening on a subject, but they come and watch the channel, they know some perspective. Tomorrow when they're having a conversation in office with Suresh, they will not be out of context. At least एक point to add कर देगा. So that's the contribution we have done to that guy or that girl in his life.
Interesting. Interesting. So you're talking about the fact that there is a need to constantly keep hearing the consumer, the person who's going to be the recipient, and in a sense, understand what is it that is being discussed and help embellish or refine it as such. So that's really what
curation of that.
Authenticity. Sorry?
Curation of that with credible information.
Yeah, but how do you manage it in the internal context? These contradictions that potentially could be there. For example, there are different lenses with which within your organization the same news story could be approached by different channels in your portfolio, or for example, Suresh, in your case, between Nexa versus Arena, or in your case where you're looking at a whole range of insurance policies, or in Rice, there's such a range as such. So how do you ensure that consistency, ensuring that the marquee India Gate in a sense is standing for and lending those values in your case, or Maruti as such, in each one of the brands actually, without really naming one? How do you ensure it kind of transcends and in a manner where every single employee is able to, in a sense, own those values as such? What are the mantras there? So Gaurav, maybe if you can start.
Yeah, so for example, like I said, we have a Times Now, Times on Bharat, which is very action-oriented content, and Mirror now is slightly human interest, and then ET now is more on economic value. So at the team level, they are completely preoccupied by their objective or purpose. The purpose has to be clear. So that they are driving individually. But collectively, at a slightly higher order, say at a order of an editor or a CEO, they all collaborate. Because they are helping us give a variety of views to our viewers. There is no one view which is right over the other.
But I'll just push you further. So there are different parts to the organization. There is the customer-facing part of the organization. There is also, say for example, technology. So IT, for example, or there could be various other parts as such. They are not necessarily consumer-facing. So how do you bring consumer centricity across the organization?
Very simple. A few years ago, one of our leaders, our CEO, came and said that very simple. I want every single employee of the company to contribute one of these two. I said, what is it? Either you contribute to the company as bringing in viewership, or you bring in revenue. So suddenly it was like, how can an IT guy bring viewership or an IT guy bring revenue? And they said, no, ye to kuch gyan and there's no truth to it. We said, no, go deeper, come back after a week and present. And they were quite surprised. The IT guys came with ideas that they can do on the TV channel that only technology can do, which you can go and sell to a brand and bring advertising revenue. Or you can bring the efficiency of a news reporting to a different order, where the newsroom can be integrated in a way where the same story can be carried across channels with the same packaging, with different treatment, different music. Slight change kiya to alag lag gaya story. So that was their contribution. Similarly, somebody from the admin came and said, I'll give you better OB vans, so your story coverage could get better. So that purpose was very clear. Every single employee either give me additional viewership or give me additional revenue. If that is clear, then people align with it.
Alignment with purpose. How do you look at it? Suresh, would you want?
Yeah, so you mentioned about these channels, which is Arena and Nexa, and 8 years back we introduced the Nexa channel, which with a clear purpose of a certain set of customers who are getting a lot more of exposure globally, and their expectations are different, and a little more premium, more experienced set of customers. So we actually defined the channel values for Nexa and for Arena separately. Here it was more of a first-time buyer. There a lot more of experienced buyers, premium, global, pampering over there. Here it was more like youthful, vibrant, and dynamic for the Arena. Now, having defined that, you're right. I mean, you know, it's not just enough to put it on paper, but actually how do people perceive it on ground is extremely important. And hence, you know, even today, the organization is actually has been aligned in a manner where we have, it doesn't converge right up to the head office right at the top, this one. For example, the sales organization converges only at the national sales head level. Even in marketing, we have a division which handles Nexa separately and another division which handles the arena set of brands. Across other functions, like for training, we have a Nexa team which handles the Nexa training and another team which handles the arena, and so on and so forth. So across the organization, it all converges right at the top and not there, including our dealerships and the network itself. Again, there, you know, it's important that we. So the entire dealership organization is also completely different. It only converges at the dealer owner, the principal, not at a sales manager or a service man. I mean, it's not like at any of these levels, but right only at the. It helps us to keep these teams different, the training programs and the understanding of the brand ethos, and then actually actually giving that that expected kind of an experience to consumers actually helps create that differentiation and maintain that the.
Fantastic. Vinit, what's your view on this in terms of getting the entire? How do you ensure that everybody in the organization owns the consumer centricity, and in a very finance is a space where there are different elements that are kind of playing and interacting at times with the consumers. There are different parts of the organization that are interacting with the same consumer.
See, I'll go a little broader in terms of, the one thing that every department has to be very careful is what is the purpose of the company. In simplistic, I can define the purpose and I can define what that purpose means actually, and which is with you today for a better tomorrow. Clearly stating that either we preserve wealth for a consumer or we create wealth for a customer. These are the only two objectives. We preserve wealth when it comes to a protection plan, we create wealth when it comes to investment plans. If we are not living by the purpose, which means that every department has to be aligned saying that this is what the purpose has to be. Operations, irrespective, marketing, or you have underwriting team getting into it, or you have finance team getting into it, or actuarial team developing products which basically create wealth, and so on and so forth. We've met a target. So it's extremely important that at the end of the term, a consumer is making money. Wonderful. If it is not, then we're not really living the purpose of, with you today for a better tomorrow. So we live with the values, we live with the purpose when it comes to a category company like us. Yeah.
Interesting. So essentially a very well-defined purpose, and that purpose is something that needs to be resonating with what the consumer requires. In the case of Maruti Suzuki, you needed to kind of create literally two organizations to ensure that you straddle both, and that's a matter of strategy, but ensuring that that consistency and authenticity of delivery is something that is maintained as such, and that's fascinating. Kunal, would you want to add in here? From
I think just to explain this a little bit better, I mean, we being in the rice and when we came in as a branded player, I think one of the banes of, loose rice in India was the consistency and the quality, and we built ourselves on the promise of delivering the best quality every time to the consumer, right? And we pride ourselves on the fact that our adoption ratios are extremely high, right? Consumers who are with us stay with us for a longer period of time. Now, and being in the staples kind of a category, it's very easy for a player to, trade off between the pricing and the quality that it is offering, right? And I think that is a philosophy that gets driven right from to every employee within the organization in terms of the practices. And, we get multiple times there is an opportunity in these kind of a category to be able to shortchange for shorter term benefits, but that is a philosophy that everybody, sees through, right? The second thing is when you look at the sales organization, the kind of transparency we are able to give down the line to our dealers, to our, retailers who are selling our product in terms of what the product will deliver or what is the quality of the product itself sends out the message to the team who's down the line selling the product that the organization is extremely clear in terms of giving the best quality at the price that it is giving. And you know, some of the things that we do in terms of our communication, for example, when we say no compromise, it essentially means no compromise with the quality. So the consistency, like we've been talking about, is extremely important to maintain, and that's what percolates down the line in the larger organization and ecosystem.
We are at the fag end of our discussion, but I want to touch upon one other thing, which is that when there are so many, moments of interaction with the brand, there would be some areas where the experience is fantastic and some aspects where it isn't as good. So, what is the role of emotion, building an emotional relationship, that brand love, vis-a-vis, otherwise, we'll be in a scenario where consumers might be very extremely, it'll be difficult for them to forgive. Sometimes there is a need to forgive and overlook also. So how do you approach that? So there is of course no question of tolerating or accepting something that is subpar, but things do go wrong. So how do you ensure that that emotional connect is built and stays for your brand as such? So is that something that you look at, and what is your philosophy vis-a-vis building that emotional connect? So for example, Maggie, it went through a significant downturn as such some years ago, where there was a controversy around certain food inspectors, but it came back, and it came back with a bang. There was something about the brand which the moment it went out of shelf as such, people were missing it. There was something that was connecting, besides the fact that it was a product which was fantastically packaged and had great taste, etc. So how do you look at building that DNA at the core of the brand architecture? Suresh.
Yeah. So completely agree with you, and that emotional connect with the brand, I think, is extremely, extremely important. And to build that emotional connect, the first thing, again, I come back to where we started, is the core of how people perceive the brand and the organization, and the sincerity of effort. For example, what I mean is that customer obsession, the customer centricity, and that since people can see through what if you're doing something or saying something, if it is not true and sincere, I think it's they can see through the whole thing. So it is important that you consistently do and are also seen as doing something for the consumer. For example, much later we had a lot of competing OEMs coming into the country, but we, Maruti Suzuki, our statement was providing this joy of mobility to consumers and actually giving them value for money products and reaching out to them across where they are. So our network expansion, for example, one of the factors was we'll go closer to consumers. It was not a competitive pressure. We were by far, but we kept doing it consistently. We kept going closer. And even today, people still remind me of that campaign of that kancha in that gypsy in somewhere in Ladakh saying ki khana milega, ye nahi milega, lekin service station milega. People, it resonates with consumers and it sticks because they've seen it happen and it is true, sincere, and hence there is a connect. Or for example, the value for money. That the campaign which talked about ki kara papa ji petrol khatam hi nahi hunda. People still remember that kind of a thing. Or like I said, our objective is to give this joy of mobility to millions of people's lives change when they have a four-wheeler. It doesn't matter what time of the day, night, meeting somebody somewhere. Their life changes with having upgrading to a car, and that's what we understand, and we kind of give that. And then the campaign of India comes home in a Maruti Suzuki. It really resonated and builds that emotional connect. And like you said, there would be a couple of one or two issues that might operationally happen, but then there's a connect with the brand, and that I think is extremely, extremely great.
Fantastic. Any other last comments, thoughts that you'd want to share with the audience?
An interesting episode on, our business, there is no scope for us to make an error. Okay, because when we are reporting a story, it better be right or we don't
daily.
report it.
It's daily.
Yeah,
It's new news.
and if you make error, then you won't be forgiven. And for us, the toughest part is the remote. If you make errors, people will change your channel or they'll go somewhere else where you don't make errors, right? So for us, we have to be really at the other end of being accurate with what we state and do it with pace and energy and everything, right? So there was one freak incident that happened about a year ago where we had a foreign guest talking on a subject and one of our editors was engaging with him in a heated debate and accidentally took him as a wrong person. So if there are two persons on the debate, he said, no, I know your view, Mr. So-and-so.
Oh, yeah.
And the producer kept telling him, you're shooting the wrong guy. But he in his emotion went forward and did the same. It lasted about 2 minutes. Then he realized and he pulled back. And then we had an edit meeting in the evening, late evening, saying, boss, ये first time हुआ in our 20 years that we, took on somebody in a wrong manner. So he said, it's simple. We are a credible company. It happens. Once in 20 years you made a mistake, right? Let's call the person up on the channel tomorrow. We'll apologize and we'll do the show again with him. That's exactly what he did. Not many brands will have the courage to do that. In a public forum where you have, 5-6 crore people watching you, you apologize, you said, hey, yesterday I made a mistake with you, come on board, let's complete that discussion with what you were pursuing. So it requires a lot of guts to come forward and say, boss, we are willing to correct that and move forward. So once in 20 years it had happened, but we had the courage to correct that and move forward.
Fantastic. So it's been a very illuminating discussion. There have been multiple things that we've spoken about. It's about delivering every aspect of the product or the service as such in a manner which is consistent, true to the purpose of the organization, true to the purpose of the brand, and kind of something that is very clearly defined for everybody in a very simple manner as such. So that is what I'm kind of unpacking from this. I would also add in one element, which is this emotional connect aspect, which we've kind of touched towards the latter part, which is that actually the experience starts even before I have actually tangibly felt the product. It's solid in the mind. It's experience is something that we all feel. So we've already started feeling, the sensorials of the product even before we purchased it, and that's the excitement, and that's what at times causes what is known as post-purchase dissonance also. So these are all realities. It's a very interesting topic. We could go on and on.